city below was still asleep, but somewhere on the 47th floor of Blackstone Tower, two lives were about to collide in a way neither of them could have imagined. It was 5:42 a.m. when Elena, dressed in a plain gray uniform, quietly pushed open the heavy glass door to the CEO's private office. She had been working here for only 3 weeks. Invisible, unnoticed, just another maid in the background of $1 billion empire. Or so she thought. He wasn't supposed to be here. No one was. The office was empty at this hour. Always. Elena froze. Her first thought wasn't fear. It was embarrassment. She was holding a cleaning rag in one hand, a half-empty spray bottle in the other. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. No words, just curiosity. As if for a moment he'd never seen another human being quite like her. She looked away quickly, mumbled an apology, and tried to leave. But then, his voice, calm, deep, a little tired. Don't go, just stay for a moment. That was the first time Elena broke her own rule. Never speak more than necessary to anyone in the upper floors. She stayed. That single decision would change everything. What began as a passing interaction in the early morning shadows would unravel into a story that blurred the lines between loyalty, power, and love. But what neither of them knew that day was how dangerous this connection would become. In the next few minutes, you will discover how a secret relationship between a billionaire CEO and his maid set off a chain of events that shocked an entire city. And why this story is not just about romance, but about trust, betrayal, and the cost of crossing invisible lines. Elena pressed the button for the lobby, her hands still trembling from that strange early morning encounter. She told herself it meant nothing. CEOs didn't notice people like her. But deep down, a flicker of curiosity refused to die. Meanwhile, Alexander Blackstone sat in his office, staring at the faint smudge her cleaning rag had left on the glass table. He had meetings, deadlines, investors breathing down his neck. But for some reason, his mind kept circling back to that moment. At Blackstone Tower, there were unwritten rules. People who worked in polished offices on the top floors didn't mingle with those who scrubbed floors or emptied trash bins. It wasn't cruelty, it was structure, status, invisible lines drawn so deep that most people forgot they were even there. But Alexander, he wasn't raised in wealth. He had clawed his way up from nothing. 2 jobs in college, endless nights without sleep. Maybe that's why he noticed her. Or maybe he thought it was something else entirely. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths more often. Sometimes in the hallway, sometimes in the kitchen, when Elena came to restock supplies. The exchanges were short, light nods, a few words here and there. But Alexander began to notice things. She was always early. She never looked at her phone while working. She hummed softly when she thought no one was listening. And then one Tuesday morning, he saw her sitting alone in the staff cafeteria, eating lunch from a simple tin container. He found himself wondering what her life was like outside these walls. What happens when curiosity turns into something more? When the CEO, a man whose every move is watched, starts paying attention to someone the world thinks he shouldn't. In offices like these, nothing stays secret for long. By the time Alexander casually offered Elena a ride home one rainy evening, whispers had already started. She's just a maid. She's lucky he even talks to her. Or worse, she's after his money. For Elena, it was suffocating. She needed the job. Her younger brother's medical bills depended on it. The last thing she wanted was attention. Yet here she was, the center of an office storm she never asked for. The real trouble began when someone, no one knew who, snapped a blurry photo of Alexander and Elena leaving the building together. Within hours, it was online. CEO spotted with mystery woman. Not a model, not an actress. Who is she? Elena didn't have social media, but her friends did. He sent her the screenshots. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or quit. Alexander, however, wasn't laughing. This wasn't just gossip. It was potential fuel for investors to question his judgment. And yet, when his assistant hinted that he should keep his distance, he found himself saying, "I'll talk to whoever I damn well want." One evening, after most of the staff had gone, Alexander found Elena in the conference room, rearranging chairs. He leaned on the doorway. You've been avoiding me, he said quietly. I've been busy, she replied without looking up. That's not it, he said, stepping closer. She finally met his gaze, and for a moment all the noise of the world faded. That night they spoke for over an hour about childhood, about dreams, about how both of them in different ways had grown up feeling invisible. Here's the thing about invisible lines. The moment you cross them, you can't go back. And the world, especially a world built on money, power, and appearances, never forgives easily. Elena stood at the edge of the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. The city looked endless from up here, beautiful but cold. A million lights, and not one of them felt like home. Inside, Alexander poured 2 glasses of wine. You're quiet tonight, he said. I'm thinking, she replied. Out? She turned to face him, about how everything can change in a heartbeat, and how scary that is. It wasn't just whispers at work anymore. Elena noticed strangers giving her lingering stares when she walked down the street. A woman at a coffee shop whispered to her friend and smirked. On the subway, someone nudged their companion, pointing discreetly. For Alexander, the pressure came from a different angle. Investors wondered if he was distracted. Board members hinted at protecting the company's image. Media outlets camped outside his building, hungry for a photo. The relationship that had started as a quiet, private connection now felt like it was unfolding on stage, with thousands of judgmental eyes watching. Elena couldn't shake the thought, if this ends badly, I lose everything. Her job, her income, her dignity, and for what? A love story the world had already decided was a mistake. Alexander's fear was different. He had built his empire from the ground up, surviving corporate battles, hostile takeovers, and scandals. This was personal. If he lost her, it wouldn't just hurt, it would gut him. Have you ever cared for someone so much that you started planning for every possible way you could lose them? That's where they were now, living under a constant shadow of what if. They started meeting in quieter places, dinner at hidden restaurants, walks in the park after dark. Alexander insisted on a driver to keep Elena safe from paparazzi, but she hated the tinted windows and the feeling of being protected like property. One night, Elena asked, "Why are you doing this? Why take the risk?" Alexander didn't hesitate. "Because you remind me of who I was before all of this." Psychologists say constant public judgment can be as damaging as physical harm. For Elena, the anxiety was relentless, her heart racing every time her phone buzzed. For Alexander, sleepless nights turned into exhaustion that bled into his work. Healthy coping mechanisms, morning walks, cooking together, long talks helped at first, but unhealthy ones crept in too, avoiding social events entirely, cutting off friends they didn't trust, checking news feeds obsessively for new articles. But what happens when the walls close in so tightly? You can't tell if you're protecting each other or trapping each other. It happened on a Thursday. Lena had been summoned to HR, not because of her performance, which was flawless, but because concerns had been raised about favoritism. She came home early, pale and shaking. "I can't do this," she said as soon as she saw him. Alexander reached for her, but she stepped back. "I'm losing myself. I used to know who I was. Now I'm just your maid to everyone out there, not a person, just a headline. If love demands you give up the very identity you fought to protect, is it still love?" This wasn't just a romance anymore. It was a battle against society, against gossip, and against their own fears. But to understand why their love was under attack, you have to go back before they met, back to the roots of a world where lines like this were drawn in the first place. Long before Alexander and Elena's story began, the world had already decided who could love whom. And that decision wasn't made by the heart. It was made by money, power, and class. In the 18th and 19th centuries, wealthy households were run by an army of domestic workers. Maids, butlers, cooks. They were essential, yet invisible. Their lives were separate from the families they served, divided by rules that were rarely spoken but always enforced. Marriages between the rich and the working class were not just discouraged, they were scandalous. In many countries, such unions meant loss of inheritance, social exile, or or even legal repercussions. The idea was simple. Marry your equal, keep the bloodline pure, protect the family's reputation. Why does this matter for Alexander and Elena? Because that history still echoes today. Even in modern cities, where anyone can theoretically marry anyone, the old rules linger in subtle ways. The wealth gap still fuels prejudice. People assume a poorer partner must have ulterior motives. Media stereotypes paint maids and domestic workers as background characters, rarely as love interests. Family pressures in elite circles often make crossing class lines feel like betrayal. Movies and TV have often told rich man, poor woman stories, but they've usually romanticized them or made the working class character a temporary challenge for the wealthy hero. Rarely do they show the long-term social consequences. When paparazzi chased Alexander and Elena, when tabloids labeled her the mystery maid, they were pulling from a century-old narrative. If you're rich, your partner must match your status, or they're a scandal. Even in countries like the US, UK, Canada, and Australia, where freedom of choice in love is a celebrated value, economic class still quietly divides people. Wealthy communities often exist in their own social bubbles. Working class jobs are undervalued, making those who hold them appear less worthy and alluring in elite eyes. The idea that love should be between equals is often code for stay in your class. Elena and Alexander's love was never just about two people. It was about centuries of rules they didn't make, but were forced to live under. When they walked down the street together, they weren't just breaking modern expectations, they were challenging history. But history, no matter how deep its roots, can be rewritten. And for every rule that's been passed down through generations, there's someone brave enough to break it. After weeks apart, Alexander and Elena realized something. They could either let the world write their ending, or they could write it themselves. Alexander's first move was bold. Instead of hiding, he invited a respected journalist to their home for an exclusive interview. No tabloids, no paparazzi ambushes, just one honest conversation. I fell in love with Elena because of her heart, not her resume, he said, looking straight into the camera. If that's a scandal, so be it. By speaking openly, they took control of the story. Viewers saw their genuine connection. The laughter, the inside jokes, the way they finished each other's sentences. They also surrounded themselves with allies, friends who didn't judge, colleagues who valued performance over gossip, family members willing to meet Elena as a person, not a stereotype. Supportive voices became their shield, making the noise outside easier to ignore. Elena began writing a blog about her journey, not as the CEO's maid, but as a woman navigating love in the face of prejudice. Her post went viral, inspiring countless others in relationships across social and economic lines. She wasn't just defending her own love story, she was giving others permission to live theirs. Alexander launched a company policy to provide better wages, education opportunities, and career growth for domestic staff and lower-tier employees. He told his team, "Respect is the foundation of any strong organization, and that starts with how we treat every single person who works here." He set boundaries. No reading gossip articles, no responding to trolls, weekly technology-free nights to reconnect. Slowly, the outside noise faded, replaced by the sound of their own shared life. Dinners cooked together, travel adventures, quiet mornings over coffee. Months later, Elena received an email from a woman in London who had been hiding her relationship with a man from a much wealthier family. "Because of you," she wrote, "I'm ready to stop hiding." Love may not erase centuries of prejudice overnight. It can chip away at it. One choice, one act of courage, one unapologetic truth at a time. In the end, the headlines faded. Gossip moved on. But their love only grew stronger. They had been tested by prejudice, whispered rumors, and societal expectations. And yet, they stood tall. Proof that the worth of a relationship is measured not by wealth or titles, but by loyalty, respect, and the courage to choose each other every single day. Love demands courage, the kind that looks beyond labels. Truth breaks the narrative. Speaking openly can dismantle gossip. Support systems matter. They remind you that you're not fighting alone. Actions change perceptions. Lead by example, and others will follow. The wind brushes Elena's hair as Alexander looks at her and says softly, "We didn't just survive their story. We wrote our own." And in that moment, the city, the same city that once judged them, feels like theirs. If you've ever been told your love isn't right because of where you came from, who you are, or what you have, this story is for you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your story. Let's start a conversation that makes love bigger than bias. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe for more stories that remind us real love is rare and worth fighting for.